Right, before I call the Education Secretary to make a statement, I note the reports about the possible increase in higher education tuition fees started appearing in the media early this afternoon. The Secretary of State is... Mr Houghton, you don't help yourself, do you? No. The Secretary of State is here to make a statement, so honourable members will have the opportunity to question. If the premature media reporting is due to an unauthorised leak, then it is great discourtesy to this House. I hope the Secretary of State will be able to identify the guilty party and take appropriate actions and brief me accordingly. So I now hope the Secretary of State is going to announce the leak inquiry and that we will get all the details of how this could have got out, and the House will be informed once that goes forward. Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, can I begin by saying I wish to express my deep regret that the content of the statement that I'm about to give appeared in the media earlier this afternoon. It had always been my intention to come before this House first to make the statement, given the significance and importance of this, because I appreciate that you, members across this House and our conventions, rightly demand and expect that. I hope you can accept my deep frustration and regret at what has taken place, and I will take whatever steps I can to keep you updated on the matter, because I do respect the conventions of this House and my responsibilities to this House, Mr Speaker.
Can I just say, can we take it from now that there will be a full inquiry into how this has happened, that everybody will be brought in, questioned, and you will then update us with a full inquiry? That's what I really want.
Mr Speaker, I can give you that undertaking, and I will speak to officials on the matter as you request.
Thank you. Secretary of State. Statement.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to make a statement about the future of our higher education sector and the changes that we will be making for students in the upcoming academic year 25-26. Before I go further, Mr Speaker, I want to make clear the approach this Labour Government takes to our universities and, above all, to the students whose education is their central purpose. Because the Conservative Government didn't just talk universities down, they talked down the aspirations of working-class families across our country. They dismissed the ambition of our young people and undermined their opportunities. This Government takes a different approach. We are determined to break down the barriers to opportunity, and higher education is central to that mission. Higher education is part of what makes our country great. Enriching our culture, powering our economy, sustaining intellectual traditions stretching back centuries, a beacon of opportunity, not just to students in this country, but from across the world, a sector of which everyone in this House ought to be proud. But when this Government took office in July, we found a university sector facing severe financial challenges. With tuition fees frozen for the last 7 years, universities have suffered a significant real terms decline in their income. And we found a regulator, Mr Speaker, subject to political whim, unable to focus on the challenges our universities face. A succession of Conservative ministers who had, for year after year, faced with tough decisions, ducked them time and again. Mr Speaker, we inherited in our universities, as across so much of our public sector, the consequences of long years of shameful abdication of responsibility. Long years in which I heard too often from students of the gap between the course they were promised and the experience they had, about the trouble they had making ends meet as they worked hard not merely at their studies, but often at 2 or more jobs on top. Long years in which I saw the amazing research our universities deliver, but how infrequently those triumphs drove wider success. Long years in which I heard from international students who make such an important contribution to our country that the previous government had made them feel neither valued nor welcomed. Mr Speaker, this is the mess members opposite left behind. But where the Conservatives shirk the hard choices, this government has not hesitated to grip the challenges we face and take the tough decisions to restore stability to higher education, to fix the foundations and to deliver change. We have accepted in full the recommendations of the independent review of the Office for Students. We have brought new leadership to the Office for Students and refocused their work to monitor universities' finances and hold leadership to account. And I thank Sir David Behan for his work, both leading the independent review and now as its interim chair. We have paused the commencement of the last government's freedom of speech legislation while we consider the impacts on universities, students and the regulator. Because whilst universities must be home to robust discussion and rigorous challenge, regulation must also be workable. Mr Speaker, I am here today to make two sets of announcements on higher education reform, addressing the challenges our students and universities face, gripping these issues as a responsible government. Firstly, Mr Speaker, we will fix the foundations. We will secure the future of higher education so that students can benefit from a world-class education for generations to come. That is why I am announcing today that, in line with the forecast set out in the budget last week, from April 2025, we will be increasing the maximum cap for tuition fees in line with inflation to £9,535, an increase of £285 per academic year. Now, I understand some students may worry about the impact this increase will have on their loan debt. So I want to reassure students already at university, when you start repaying your loan, you will not see higher monthly repayments as a result of these changes to fee and maintenance loans. That's because student loans are not like consumer loans. Monthly repayments depend on earnings, not simply the amount borrowed or interest rates. And at the end of any loan term, any outstanding loan balance, including interest built up, will be written off. Increasing the fee cap has not been an easy decision. But I want to be crystal clear that this will not cost graduates more each month as they start to repay their loans. Universities are responsible for managing their own finances and must act to remain sustainable. But members across the House will agree that it is no use keeping tuition fees down for future students if the universities are not there for them to attend, nor if students can't afford to support themselves while they study. So I can also confirm today that we will boost support for students with living costs by increasing maximum maintenance loans in line with inflation, giving them an additional £414 a year in 25-26. And I'm confirming that from the start of the 25-26 academic year, a lower fee limit of £5,760 will be introduced for foundation years in classroom-based subjects such as business, social science and humanities. This government recognises the importance of foundation years for promoting access to higher education, but they can be delivered more efficiently in classroom-based subjects at lower cost to students. Madam Deputy Speaker, the change this government is bringing must go further. So the second set of announcements I make today signal the start of deeper change for our students, for our universities and for our country. Today I want to set out the scale of our ambition to build a higher education system fit not just for the challenges of today, but of tomorrow too. In the months ahead, we will publish our proposals, because in universities, as across our public services, investment can only come with the promise of major reform. The contribution of higher education to our economy, to our communities, to our country must grow and strengthen. That begins with universities doing more to spread opportunity to disadvantaged students, both in expanding access and in improving outcomes. And our most recent data shows why. The gap between disadvantaged students and their peers in progression to university by age 19 is the highest on record. I will not tolerate this shameful divide any longer. Universities can do more and they must do more. And they must rise to the huge challenge of technological change, supporting adults with the flexibility that they need to retrain. Which is why in the budget we confirmed we are pressing ahead with the lifelong learning entitlement. Next, while the UK is home to many world-class universities, it's time that all students in higher education in this country feel the benefit. It's time to raise the bar further on teaching standards, to improve our world-leading reputation and drive out poor practice. It's time to make sure that all students get good value for money, which, if we're honest, hasn't always been the case in the past. But it goes further than that. Universities must do more to raise their impact beyond their gates. They must do more to drive the growth that this country so sorely needs, attracting talent from around the world, joining with Skills England, employers and partners in further education to deliver the skills people and businesses need, and shaping world-class research to create good jobs across the country. Members across the House will know how important universities can be for the areas that surround them too, not just for local economies, but for local communities too. So I want universities to work harder to embed themselves in those local communities. Civic anchors, the beating heart of local life in our towns and cities, not ivory towers far from local concerns. Lying beneath these challenges must be a further transformation, a renewed drive for efficiency. Students and taxpayers support the cost of our universities. They are right to expect that every penny is spent effectively. We will not accept wasteful spending. Universities must rise to the challenge, and that means ensuring that the pay of their top teams is fair and justifiable. I'm determined that our world-class higher education sector does not merely survive in the years ahead, but thrives, supporting students in every corner of our country and at every stage of their lives. I'm determined that our universities become all I know that they can be. The scale of our ambition demands a new approach, one rooted in partnership. So I look forward to partnering with the sector, the Office for Students and UK Research and Innovation. And I will work closely with ministers across government, in particular the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, to deliver a reformed and strengthened higher education system for our country. As today this government looks to the future, I'm reminded that more than 60 years have passed since the Robbins Report on higher education was presented to this House, with its famous principle that courses of higher education should be available for all those who are qualified by ability and attainment to pursue them and who wish to do so. That principle drove the expansion of higher education over the decades that followed under successive governments of both parties. It is central to the thinking of this government today. That's why responsible governments must treat universities not as a political battleground, but as a public good. That's why on this side of the House, we want to see the continued success of our young people. That's why we are determined to ensure the sustainability and success of our higher education sector, not just in the years ahead, but for the decades to come. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Laura Trott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, we had a budget last week which declared war on business, private sector workers and farmers, as we've just been hearing. It seems today that the Secretary of State wants to add students to that list. Not content with pushing up the cost of living for everyone with an inflationary budget and pushing down wages with a national insurance increase, we are now in a situation whereby students will suffer from the first inflationary increase in a number of years at a time when students can least afford it. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, yet again, there was no sign of this in the Labour manifesto. No. Indeed, the Prime Minister made scrapping university tuition fees a centrepiece of his leadership campaign back in just 2020. Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps we should start putting sell-by dates on statements the Prime Minister makes. But it is not just the Prime Minister. In July this year, at the time of the King's speech, the Secretary of State said that she had no plans to increase tuition fees. And yesterday, the Chancellor said that there was no need to increase taxes further. Yet, what is happening today, Madam Deputy Speaker, apart from a hike in the effective tax graduates have to pay? Madam Deputy Speaker, students haven't had a chance to prepare for this rise. They will have fairly expected, based on all the statements above, that the last thing a Labour government would do in office is put up tuition fees. We have some of the best universities in the world here in the UK, but there is much more that we need to do to reform the system to make it better and fairer for students in universities. Making sure courses will provide students with an economic return, helping universities harness the growth potential of innovations that they foster, and ensuring students and lecturers are free to express their views and debate. We'll be willing to work with the government on all these things. It's also right that we look at university funding, but pushing up the costs for students into an unreformed system at short notice will lead to students up and down the country feeling betrayed. So, can I ask the Right Honourable Lady, how much of this increase will be absorbed by the national insurance increase for employees at university? Is it her intention to increase fees every year, or are students to expect this to be the only increase? What is the impact of this change on public finances, and has the OBR been consulted? Why was this change not announced at the budget? How much longer will it take the average borrower to repay their tuition fees as a result of this change? And, Madam Deputy Speaker, why were Labour not upfront about this in their manifesto? Madam Deputy Speaker, in June 2023, the title of an article written by the now Secretary of State proclaimed, "Graduates, you will pay less under a Labour government." Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, it turns out you will pay more. More broken promises.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, amidst the full outrage that we just heard from the Shadow Education Secretary, I didn't at one point hear what her response was in terms of whether she will support this or not. She, like her party, for many, many months during that general election campaign, had nothing to say other than to do down the ambition and the aspiration of our young people and their families who wanted the opportunity to go on to university. They went into the last election determined to ensure that fewer young people had the chance to go to university. I think that's shameful. That is never something we on this side will back. Young people with talent and ambition and their families want a government that recognises it. And it's little wonder that at the ballot box on the 4th of July, her party got a clear message. It's just a shame that in the time since, there has been no reflection on why that was. They have learned nothing from their years of failure. They ducked the tough decisions for years. And I make absolutely clear to this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not a decision I take any pleasure in. It is not a decision that I want to take, but I am determined to secure the long-term financial sustainability of our world-leading universities. She is right to recognise their success. They are beacons around the world. That necessitates tough decisions that she and her colleagues in the Treasury ducked year after year. They put a Conservative peer in to chair what should have been an independent regulator. They picked fights with the sector time and again, and there was never a serious plan over the course of 10 years to reform the higher education sector from the party opposite. I am determined to bring that reform. We will set out further plans, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the months to come for the reform that we will bring around efficiency, access and participation for our young people. And to the precise questions that she asks, as we lay legislation, we will publish an impact assessment alongside that.
Chair of the Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first put on record that I am the parent of a young person in her first year at university. The Secretary of State has today set out very clearly the case for our universities and the justification for the announcement that she is making today. But as young people who might be applying for university as this announcement is being made, see perhaps only the headlines of this announcement, can I ask what steps she's taking to ensure that it is really effectively communicated so that this is not a deterrent for young people from low and middle income backgrounds to apply to university in the first place?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I look forward to speaking with her at the Select Committee and with her newly constituted committee about this and many other issues. What I would say to her is that I do recognise the importance that comes of communicating the message that university should be for all young people who have demonstrated they have the qualifications and talent that is required. This was not an easy decision to make, but I do need to ensure, as Secretary of State, that we secure the long-term financial sustainability of the sector. But alongside that, I am absolutely clear to the sector, to Vice-Chancellors and others, that they must do more to provide better support and widening access and participation so that more young people, especially those from more disadvantaged backgrounds, have the opportunity to benefit from higher education.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Ian Sollom.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for advance sight of the statement. It is clear that the current university funding system is broken. Not only is it pushing many universities into a financial crisis, the changes made by the previous Conservative government have left the system that is deeply unfair in how it treats students. And it simply can't be right to raise fees without taking steps to further reform that system substantially to make it fairer. By abolishing maintenance grants for disadvantaged students in 2016, the Conservatives put up a barrier between disadvantaged students and higher education. And the Liberal Democrats opposed that abolition at the time, and we've consistently campaigned to restore them ever since. The previous government also cut the repayment threshold to £25,000 so that today's students have to repay hundreds of pounds more per year than older graduates on the same salary. And perhaps worst of all, they lengthened the repayment period from 30 to 40 years for those starting courses from August 2023 onwards, So today's students will still be paying back their loans in 2066. So will the Secretary of State accept that the first priority must be to fully reform and fix the damage that those changes made and create a fair system for all students? That has to be the best way forward, not simply putting up fees without those much wider reforms. The crisis in funding for universities must be addressed, but has the government considered how to support universities without raising fees? Would the Secretary of State agree that an important first step would be to recognise the benefits of international students and give universities the stability in policies on that front? And would she also agree that any reform must examine how universities currently spend their allocation of £10,000 per student per year, so that's spent as efficiently as possible? Thank you.
Yeah.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his questions. I would gently observe that it might have been slightly before his time in this House, but I think his party has got a bit of form on this topic, so I will address the questions in the spirit with which he asked them. I appreciate the constructive approach that he has taken. As part of the reform that we want to deliver for our young people and for our sector, the questions that he raises are important ones about making sure that young people are supported to succeed. I've also been very clear since becoming Secretary of State that our international students play a crucial role not just in our communities and in our country, but the contribution they make to our local economies too. I see it myself as a constituency MP. As we take forward that programme of reform working with the sector and others, I would of course be happy to discuss that further with the Honourable Gentleman.
Rachael Maskell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the last government nearly bankrupted a number of universities, and indeed my own university, I have two excellent universities, had to go through a significant redundancy programme in order to stay afloat. However, I do recognise the challenges that students in my constituency are facing, not least because of the high cost of living. So as part of her reforms, will she also look at the cost of housing students as well, so that students can pay their way when they are studying?
I can say to my honourable friend who makes an important point that yes, absolutely, we will take that into consideration. I would also add that I think it is important that we look especially at student accommodation, which I know is a big challenge in many university towns, such as the constituency that she represents. I do believe the sector should be doing more to address issues around student accommodation, working with local councils, and we will be setting clear expectations around how that should work in future.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Secretary of State mentioned having paused the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. Does she accept that, given that the Act got royal assent in May 2023, it remains the law of the land until repealed by this Parliament? And how long does she expect that pause to continue?
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman. He is correct in the question that he asks. What I would say to him around the commencement of the provisions and the long-term future of the Act, I do believe it is important that our universities are places of robust challenge, disagreement, and that students should be exposed to a range of views, some of which they may not agree with. But it is important alongside that that regulation is workable. That's why we are taking our time to make sure we get this right, listening to a range of voices across the sector who hold differing views. That work is underway, and we are making sure that we act in listening to those views, and that will be at the heart of further steps we take forward in this area.
Darren Paffey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would not be standing here today were it not for the incredible opportunities of a university education. I was the first in my family to attend and spent the next 20 years as a higher education lecturer watching culture wars break out and watching them increasingly break the financial system. Would the Secretary of State agree with me that we now have an opportunity to restore universities as machines of opportunity and economic growth?
I would agree with my honourable friend who recognises, both in his professional life before coming to this House and also as a constituency MP, the crucial role that our universities play in local towns and cities, but also in providing opportunities for lots of young people. There is one area alongside this where I know we need to make more progress, and I know my honourable friend has a real interest in this area, and this is where it comes to care experienced young people and their opportunities at university. There is a lot more that the sector must do to support young people coming through the care system who want the chance to go on to university, to make sure the additional barriers that they face are overcome, and I would expect them to be doing more.
Christine Jardine.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I wonder if the Secretary of State would accept that it might have been better to have a wider review of the whole system. It is broken, we know that. Have a wider review without jumping immediately to putting up tuition fees. And while she says that we all respect and want to protect our world-beating universities, how does she square that with her government removing the funding for the exascale computer at Edinburgh University, which would have maintained not only its position, but our university sector's position?
Madam Deputy Speaker, in line with the approach that we took at this budget, a one-year settlement that allows us to fix the foundations, the announcement that I'm setting out today is very much in line with this, the need to bring financial sustainability to the sector, because we recognise the acute financial pressures that many universities are facing after years of falling income where it comes to fees. That was not an easy decision, but it cannot be the entirety of what we do. I'm determined to reform the sector. I will happily work with her party to look at ideas in terms of how we can do that. But she will know as well as I do also that where it comes to Scotland, the record there in terms of progression to university is not a strong one. And despite that, the record is not a strong one where it comes to progression for young people from more disadvantaged backgrounds.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I commend my right honourable friend for this making such a bold and difficult decision here when so many predecessors shied away from it. Clearly, putting the sector on a sound financial footing is crucial, but I also welcome the move on the maintenance support. Can she just say, when she's talking about creating efficiency in the sector, can she just assure me that she's not talking about Vice Chancellors balancing staff and workload, but actually addressing some of the overspend in some capital projects, which might be viewed as being particularly wasteful, so that good money does not follow bad?
My honourable friend has long championed our fantastic universities, but he is right to draw attention to the need for further efficiencies. But he is also right to identify that efficiencies do not mean making staff do more with less, or indeed fewer staff. It does mean reining in needless or excessive spend and waste, and he is right to highlight that in the House today.
Richard Houghton.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. 10 million pensioners, almost 30 million workers. The IFS say now we getting less wages because their national insurance tax rises. Tens of thousands of farmers, hundreds of thousands of small businesses seeing business rates rising. Today, millions of students. Is there anyone that this government told before the general election, don't worry, that they have since shafted?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do remain slightly bewildered by the approach of the right honourable gentleman, who clearly has learned nothing from the election campaign that we've just been through, and clearly hasn't been listening when he has heard time and again the £22 billion black hole that his party left behind, the difficult decisions that they ducked year after year. That is their record. He should reflect on that.
Adam Thompson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and through 10 years of career in the higher education sector and now as the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on universities, two things have become abundantly clear to me. Firstly, the Conservative Party left the sector in utterly dire straits when they left office, and secondly, that today's measures are absolutely necessary for our universities to avoid bankruptcy. But what steps is the Secretary of State taking today with universities, with students and with our campus unions to develop a new financial model, one that delivers excellence and value for students and also stability and security for university staff and management?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who brings real expertise on these matters to the House. I've been clear with the sector that in making sure that we as government play our part in securing financial sustainability, they too must do more. That involves playing an expanded role in driving economic growth, including in our towns and cities across the country. They ought to be considering how they could do more, particularly working with further education providers to look at different ways of delivering provision, especially for adult learners who often need a different approach in order to upskill, to retrain and to take on new opportunities. I've seen some great examples of that around the country, some fantastic practice, but there is absolutely more that the sector should be doing.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to welcome the Secretary of State's announcements on increased maintenance loans and what that will do for equality of opportunity. And I agree with her about how the last government didn't properly value the contribution of international students. For over 15 years, the much higher fees charged to international students have cross-subsidised British students, to say nothing of what international students do for British soft power. Will the government remove international students from the net migration figures so that this cross-subsidy can continue?
I agree with the honourable gentleman about the important contribution that international students make to our country, but also the reach that they give us around the world, that soft power, the influence and the contribution, the business and trading links that they grow and develop. I'm afraid I can't give him the answer he is seeking on the wider question, however.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Keele University and the University of Staffordshire are two of the wonderful universities around my constituency, and they have been warning for a long time of the dire circumstances they face financially. But we forget that they are also major employers in my constituency, so I welcome the announcement that this financial support will give, if nothing else, to protect jobs in those institutions that are currently facing a desperate budget round. But can I ask the Secretary of State, because I share her ambition for opening up, widening participation, and in my patch, Uni Connect, the High Horizon scheme, is doing so much work to help disadvantaged students access higher education. Can she say what her department is doing to ensure that funding is in place so that more young people from places like Stoke-on-Trent can have a higher education experience?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He is right to raise the issues that he has and to highlight the important contribution that universities make in terms of employment opportunities, not just where it comes to academics and others engaged in research and teaching, but also into a wide range of jobs right across the board, whether that's our security staff, hospitality staff and library staff, many jobs that exist across higher education. They play a crucial role. What we are looking at as a department is how we can work with the sector to deliver an expanded role where it comes to the civic role of our universities, and how important it is that they do more where it comes to economic growth too, but also widening participation, because I think it is shameful that too few young people from disadvantaged backgrounds have the opportunity now to go to university.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's announcement that a university should be the home of robust discussion and rigorous challenge, and I think that is very welcome. But she must be aware that many students are put off going to university by the already very high levels of fees. And since there are no proposals put forward to reform university finance in her statement today, only to charge students more, isn't this going to drive more people away from university education rather than to it? And universities should not be dependent just on student income to survive. Shouldn't we be moving in the direction of lowering or indeed removing fees altogether to make higher and further education open genuinely to all in our society?
I agree that there is more that universities can do to ensure that they have a wide source of income, and that includes greater work around economic growth, around spin-offs and much more besides. And I'll be working with my right honourable friend, the Science and Technology Secretary, on precisely those questions. The reality of the situation that we find is it was necessary to bring forward this increase next year in order to stabilise the sector. It's a difficult decision, but, Madam Deputy Speaker, a necessary one, because it's no good encouraging young people to go to university if their institutions continue to be in financial peril.
Belribara Abbey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the Minister for her statement and fully understand that something needs to be done. Tuition fees were introduced just before I went to university, and it never sat well with me that members in this House went to university free of charge and had a grant too, and then seemingly pulled up the drawbridge behind them. And whilst I'm pleased that the Minister touched on disadvantaged students and our plans to conduct an equality impact assessment, we know that university applications have been slowly declining, and I want to ask if the Minister has plans to perhaps review her actions if this equality impact assessment shows that there are issues for disadvantaged students.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. We will be setting out further plans in the coming months around the wider reform that we intend to bring to the sector. And I do recognise the genuine concern that she has in wanting to make sure that talented young people who want the chance to expand their minds, to benefit from university, have the chance to do so. And there is much more that the sector can and must do to improve outcomes for disadvantaged students, including around progression. Because sadly what we see at the moment is not just a reduction in the numbers of disadvantaged young people thinking about university, the progression rates in terms of completion are just not good enough, and more needs to happen on that front too.
Ian Room.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Universities work in collaboration with the FE sector, such as Trott College in North Devon, which is in my constituency. Government funding for the FE sector has fallen significantly in real terms over the last decade, leading to falling teacher pay. What are the plans to fund the FE sector so they can remain a viable and accessible option for students, particularly in rural areas like mine, so they can access university courses?
The honourable gentleman raises an important point about not just the state of our further education sector, but also the important collaboration that takes place between further education and higher education providers, including in communities where travelling times might be longer, and ensuring that access to education is available to a much wider range of people. This is an area where I've seen some really great work going on across the country, but I think there is more that we as government can encourage higher education institutions to do. Where it comes to further education and the situation that we inherited as a government, a real mess where it comes to further education, a sector that had been ignored for so many years. We are determined to put that right. That's why we invested £300 million in this budget into further education, alongside a £300 million capital allocation for the first time in a number of years, to make sure that we are investing in our further education colleges, which are crucial parts of our towns and cities.
Andrew Lewin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the University of Hertfordshire, we have thousands of international students. In Hatfield, they are most welcome and they make a great contribution. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, when the party opposite was in power, the Independent Office for Students concluded that the entire higher education model was now reliant on international fee income. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that that was a completely unsustainable model and is another example of the Conservative Party ignoring a problem and leaving it to these benches to rescue and reform our higher education sector?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. International students do play an important role in our communities and make an important contribution to our economy. But he is right to draw attention to the fact that there can sometimes be pressures. I know that can be especially acute where expansion happens and accommodation, the right levels of accommodation do not follow. We will be setting clear expectations of the sector that they have to work with local councils to make sure that high quality accommodation is available. But alongside that, as a government, we are legislating to make sure that there are higher standards in the private rented sector through the Renters Reform Bill, because too many students are expected to live in substandard private rented accommodation.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To put on record, I'm currently the parent of 3 students, 2 undergrads and 1 postgrad, who are all paying their fees. Would she agree with me that courses offering just 8 hours a week of contact time do not represent good value for money, and ensure that this element is fully evaluated in the reforms that are coming? And also to advise the sector that if students are only getting 8 hours of contact time, which is effectively a part-time course, they don't need to charge the full fees.
What I'd say to the Honourable Lady is that we work closely with the Office for Students on the areas that she has identified. She is right that we need to do more where it comes to quality, particularly around teaching quality, and that is an area that we will be discussing further in the months to come, and I'd be more than happy to discuss that issue in particular with her and her party in the months to come.
Sean Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Universities are critical for students, of course, but also economic growth and town and city regeneration and much more. But reform and accountability are also important. Will the Secretary of State just outline in a little bit more detail the accountability that she will hold these universities' vice-chancellors to in regards to teacher contact time, helping vulnerable students, and making sure that universities play a huge part in their wider communities in the towns and cities that they are such anchor institutions?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. One of the first actions that I took as Secretary of State was to refocus the work of the Office for Students on precisely those areas that he identified, because it is important that we make sure that student experience at university is strong and that they have the opportunities to take part in a wider range of activities. I'm also acutely aware of the financial pressures that many students are experiencing at the moment, and that is why we have taken the decision to increase maintenance alongside the rate of inflation. But I've set out 5 priorities today, Madam Deputy Speaker, for reform of the higher education sector. We will expect higher education providers to play a stronger role in expanding access and in improving outcomes, especially for disadvantaged students, and that they should make a stronger contribution to their communities and to economic growth.
Joshua Reynolds.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it wasn't that many years ago that I was at university, and just before... who would have thought it? Who would have thought? And just before the Secretary of State took to her feet, I checked my student loan balance. That's just over £60,000. I know that for many students at university, the elimination of maintenance grants was devastating, and the reintroduction of maintenance grants will mean that living costs are not barriers to university for those disadvantaged students. So will the Secretary of State confirm today in her statement the reintroduction of maintenance grants so no young people are put off university for fear of the costs?
Yeah. I can tell the honourable gentleman that we will look at this issue as part of wider reform, but he will appreciate that after 14 years of Conservative failure where it comes to our universities, there are no easy options here, and this is a difficult decision and a difficult choice to have to make. But I can give him the assurance that I want to make sure that university remains an attractive option for all young people who want the chance to learn, to expand their minds and to take on all of the opportunities that come of a university education.
Luke Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State's leadership on this issue, not just on the funding, but also on the reform that the sector needs. The previous government's approach to regulation put ideology over evidence, and one example of this is in the role of the designated quality body. This body was there to check on quality and standards in higher education, but it had to give up that role because the regulatory climate that the previous government brought in was non-compliant with international standards. So can the Secretary of State assure the House that the regulatory approach she will take will be different from the previous government and ensure that our higher education sector continues to be world-leading?
My honourable friend brings real experience on these matters to the House, and he will know that it is important that the independent regulator retains that autonomy to act, but we will work with them closely on areas of quality, on student outcomes and much more besides. I do have to say to him that he will know that under the last Conservative government, increasingly that regulator was fixated on political matters, on political whim, and didn't have enough of a focus on teaching quality and on outcomes for students. Under the new interim chair, Sir David Behan, they have changed that approach and are focusing on making sure that our universities are not just sustainable, but deliver better outcomes for our students too.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement? With fees to increase, how can we expect students to stay and work within the United Kingdom when fields are much more greener on other shores and it's much cheaper to live there as well? Can I make a plea, if I can, please, to the Secretary of State? I think of the retention of students and junior doctors. I've repeatedly asked for bursaries or forgiveness of debt against a job and a commitment for 3 or 4 years perhaps. Would the Secretary of State consider that it will mean more students and junior doctors staying, and that has got to be good if it is enacted? Thanks very much.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. The chance to go to university is a long-term investment in the future prospects of many young people. Not just the chance to study and to learn, but also the chance to take on a new career in the way that he described, particularly in our health service. This is a matter, of course, that overlaps with the Department of Health and Social Care, and he can be assured that we keep these matters under review.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I draw members to my register of interests. Any country that's serious about growing its economy should also be serious about supporting its university sector. And it's within that context I absolutely welcome the promise that a review will be published soon. I hope it will take lessons from Scotland, where, whilst undergraduate education is free, universities are grossly underfunded to deliver it, and the announcement today will only widen the gap between Scotland and England in that regard. I also welcome the confirmation that we need our universities to be able to attract talent from around the world. Both the Higher Education Policy Institute and my union, the UCU, have said that the previous government actually put blocks in place to that happening. So I'd like to ask the Secretary of State if she will engage with the sector to ensure that we have the right environment to attract the best students and the best staff to the UK universities, and also ensure the very best international graduates can work here at the point of graduation. Thank you.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He raises a number of important points and I appreciate that. What I would say to him, in addition to the points he's raised around the record in Scotland, he will know better than most of us the shameful record of the SNP government where it comes to opportunities for university study for our more disadvantaged students. The share of first-time university entrants from Scotland's most deprived areas fell for the second consecutive year, and he will know that the SNP government in Scotland also cut mental health provision for Scottish students.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd also like to put on record that my husband works for a university. I welcome today's announcement that the government plans to reform and strengthen higher education. I went from a northern comprehensive school to university, and I agree it's vital we expand access so students from all backgrounds can go to university. I met recently with the Vice-Chancellor of Bradford University. They have a high proportion of students drawn from the city, but many students fail to progress due to the lack of high-quality graduate jobs. I'd like to invite the Secretary of State to come to Bradford, perhaps meet with other Bradford MPs and our university to see the civic contribution it makes, and hopefully we'll see more of that from other universities in future.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd be delighted to visit and to meet with my honourable friend and other colleagues in neighbouring constituencies to discuss the approach that's been taken there. I think the point that she makes is also a wider one, which is that our higher education sector is diverse. Includes a range of providers who offer different kinds of opportunities, training and study for different sets of students. Of course, it's often young people that are the focus of our attention in these discussions, but of course the chance to go to university later on in life is also crucial, the opportunity to retrain, to upskill and to make a change of career. And I know that it is many of our newer universities who have driven so much of the excellent work that I have seen around expanding opportunities for adults to go back into education.
Peter Swallow.
Madam Deputy Speaker, before I was elected to this place, I was a university lecturer and a researcher, and I worked hard to expand access to education for all. But I do agree with the Secretary of State that universities do need to do more to ensure that people, no matter their background, have the opportunity to access a university education and the social mobility that comes with that. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that these opportunities are a fantastic route for social mobility, whether students choose to study a science degree, a social science degree, or one of the fantastic arts and humanities degrees?
I agree with my honourable friend, and what he will recognise is that over many years, what we heard from the party opposite was a doing down of young people's ambitions to go on and study. He will have heard talk like me, dismissive talk that I won't repeat, about types of degree and the kind of study that our young people were engaged in. And I think it is absolutely essential for a modern economy to have the chance for young people absolutely to study science and technology and much more besides, but also subjects like art and music, not just because they are good in and of themselves, but also are increasingly a key part of driving economic growth in our country.
MacDonald.
The state of the finances of higher education institutes like the University of East Anglia are likely to be improved by this announcement. Can the Secretary of State assure staff and students that mechanisms are in place to ensure that increased income from fees translates into fewer job losses and helps encourage more students from lower income backgrounds into university?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. That is absolutely my expectation as she sets out. We need to see a reining in of excessive and wasteful spend in universities, and there must be a much greater push where it comes to efficiency. We as a government have made the difficult decision to increase fees in order to provide sustainability for the sector. The sector now must also play their part too.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have Falmouth University in my constituency, which is a world-leading arts university. And unlike the party opposite, this government has made commitments to the arts and to restore the arts as a large part of the economy in this country. And I wonder if the Secretary of State could just confirm that arts degrees will be an important part of the future of the economy in this country and supported by this government.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. Whilst it is undoubtedly the case that going to university is often a long-term investment in your earning potential and in career opportunities, the chance to study is also a good in and of itself. And that also means we must value and respect a wide range of courses and opportunities. So absolutely, including subjects like music and art and much more besides, although I probably should point out that many very well paid great careers also result from studying such subjects.
And the final question, Mark Sewards.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, when I was a student at Morley High School, the University of Leeds reached out to me and students like me to ensure that we considered a place at their institution, despite the fees at the time. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that it's crucial that these universities, whatever the fees are, expand access to working-class students if we truly are going to break down the barriers to opportunity?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree very strongly with my honourable friend. It is crucial that our university sector does more to open up opportunities, including to working-class young people and those who do not have a family history of going to university. The experience that he describes was very much the experience I had too, not just from the encouragement I received from my brilliant teachers at school, but also the opportunity to visit universities and to see what was available. The concern that I have at the moment, however, is that whilst there is often individual good practice, the type of which he describes, universities should do more, particularly within their regions, to collaborate, to avoid duplication, to make sure that they are serving their communities and drawing on the wide range of talent that is available, making sure that university is an attractive option for young people who might not otherwise consider the chance to go to higher education.